In this exercise, we're going to change the previous program so that instead of the user entering the values one by one in a text box, we're going to give them a rich text box where they can enter all 5 values, each on a separate line, and then just click a button to store the values and calculate the average. So I've changed the interface so that instead of the text box, we now have a rich text box. I just want to change its name to rich text box numbers. And I have, instead of having the add button and the average button, I now have a btn store, a store button. And this button will store the values that the user entered into the rich text box in the array, the numbers array that we had previously, and then it will also calculate the average. So we now only have the one event handler. Okay, so I still have the form level declarations here, but since we now only have one event handler, I can actually declare the array inside the event handler. What we now want to do, so we assume when this event handler is executed that the user has provided 5 values, and we want to now one by one take those lines with the different values and store them into the numbers array. So I'm going to use a for loop for that. I really don't need the count variable anymore, so I can use the for counter. So I'm going to say for I equals 0 and I less than 5, because we have the 5 elements in the array, we want I to be the index to the array, and it must go from 0 up to 4. Okay, so what we want to do in here is we want to say numbers I is equal to, now we want to get from the rich text box numbers lines the ith value. Okay, but now numbers is an integer array. The rich text numbers lines are all strings, so we have to convert that to a string, to an integer. Okay, so let's just explain this statement again. So the for loops counter I goes from 0 up to 4. When it is 0, that 0 will be the index to the numbers array. So then the 0th, in other words the first element of the numbers array, will get this value. This value comes from the rich text box numbers and from its lines property. And the same index is used to find the correct line to assign to the numbers array. So in effect, lines is just another array, but in this case it's an array of string values. Okay. So we take each of those string values, we assign it to the integer array. So once we've done that, we can now have another for loop which says int j equals 0, j goes up to 4, so we test 5 and we say j plus plus. So in this for loop we want to accumulate a sum. So we declare a variable int sum, start at 0. So this will now be similar to the previous average event handler that we had in the previous exercise. Okay, so in here we just have sum plus equal numbers j, and then we also have the double average variable, and we calculate the average is equal to the sum divided by 5.0, and finally message box show the average is convert to string average. So in this event handler we have two for loops. The first for loop goes through the lines in the rich text box and takes each line, places it in the array. Then we go into the second part where we calculate the sum. First the sum of all the values in the numbers array, and then the average. Okay, I'll show you another version of this just now. Okay, let's just run and make sure it works. So I'm going to enter the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then click on the button and it will tell me the average is 3. Okay, so we could have simplified this. We could have combined the two for loops. So I could have put all my declarations up there. And as we went through this for loop, instead of only adding the sum to the numbers, I could just say sum plus equals numbers I. And then I can remove this for loop because it's already what we had there before is now included in the first for loop. So this will do exactly the same. So while we are adding the numbers from the lines to the numbers array, we just also add that number to the sum variable. So that once we've added all the numbers to the array, we've also calculated the complete sum.